The controversy over Joe Rogan has now kicked into high gear after a bunch of has-been 1960s rockers decided that they would tell Spotify to remove their music or get rid of Joe Rogan. Specifically, they say they are angry at Joe Rogan for purveying what they called COVID misinformation, which, again, this is just an excuse to get rid of Rogan. It really is. It is not a coincidence that all of this started to snowball after Jordan Peterson's latest interview with Rogan, in which Jordan Peterson was talking about everything ranging from race to climate change, like a 4-hour conversation. And people on the left hate Jordan Peterson, and they hate the fact that Joe Rogan talks to people like Jordan Peterson. See, if there's one thing the left hates more than anything else, it's anyone who gives a platform to people they don't like. And so they've now created almost a chain of deplatformings. So the idea here is they're going to get angry at Spotify for platforming Joe Rogan, for platforming Jordan Peterson, for platforming people like me. Right? There's like a chain of infectiousness that the left believes exists. That if Joe Rogan talks to me directly, that's a problem. If Joe Rogan talks to Jordan Peterson directly, that's a problem. If Spotify gives Joe Rogan the ability to talk to these other two directly, now it's Spotify's problem. And the infectiousness just rises all the way up the chain. Now they're saying, again, this is about COVID misinformation, because for the left, emergency is the predicate for violating all the rules. The idea always and forever is that there is something so grave happening out there that we must violate core principles like freedom of speech in order to shut it down. And make no mistake, this is a freedom of speech issue, not in the First Amendment sense, but in the cultural sense. When you are saying that a platform like Spotify, which is designed in order to allow people to get their ideas out there, should be shutting down voices like Joe Rogan's. Joe Rogan's not a neo-Nazi. Again, even shutting down neo-Nazis in the United States is generally forbidden, right, under First Amendment law. But Spotify is a private company, so they can have some content standards. But the suggestion that Joe Rogan is well outside the content standards, like a guy who talks variously with people like me and people like Dave Chappelle, a guy who will sit down with people of the far left and people of the right, that this is somehow the great sin. It's the fact that Rogan even talks to folks who are not within the mainstream left that the left is so angry about right here. And they're using COVID as a rationale to go after Rogan because Rogan happens not to follow the party line when it comes to vaccines and when it comes to masking and when it comes to a lot of the other issues that the left has made into religious icons. And I disagree with Joe on some of his takes with regard to COVID. He and I have discussed it on his show. Right? I think that the vaccines are effective. I think the vast majority of people should get them. I think if you have a pre-existing condition, you certainly should get them. I think if you're older, you should get them. Joe has more doubts about the vaccine than I do. But that doesn't mean that we can't have the conversation. We should have the conversation. And in fact, it was Joe Rogan who completely shellacked the doctor from CNN, Sanjay Gupta, when CNN accused Joe Rogan of taking horse dewormer as opposed to the human form of ivermectin. CNN has not been accused of platforming misinformation, even though CNN does it on a routine basis with regard to COVID. They're constantly putting people on the air who say things that are just flat out false about COVID. Implying a death rate in children that is extremely high, which is not true. Implying tremendous efficacy rates for cloth masks, which many of their own pundits have suggested is not true. Misinformation, in other words, is a fungible term meaning I don't want this person on the air. As opposed to just being obvious about it and saying, I don't like Joe Rogan, so I don't want him on the air, which is what they would say if Joe Rogan actually were, say, a neo-Nazi. They would just say, I don't like him. We want him to go away. And then we could have an argument over whether that person should go away or not. But that's not what they're saying. Instead, what they're suggesting is there should be some sort of objective standard whereby Joe Rogan has violated the COVID misinformation policies, and now we're going to leverage him off the air. Now, Spotify knows that Joe Rogan doesn't violate any of his policies. They signed him, and they're paying him like $20 million a year, Joe Rogan. But what they can do, and this is what happens at all of the non-political institutions, supposedly apolitical neutral institutions, the left understands that it can weaponize those institutions by the process of renormalization that I've talked about many times before. If they get a small, angry coterie of people to be absolutely intransigent, they can force the entire corporation to the left. And that's what they're attempting to do with Spotify right now. What they're attempting to do with Rogan is get a few rockers, aging rockers, maybe some more mainstream people, to say it's either us or Rogan. And then Spotify has a market choice to make. Do they dump Rogan and take the hit, even though Joe has like 11 million listeners per episode? Or do they keep Rogan and risk losing the Neil Youngs of the world? So Spotify has already started to cave just a little bit. And I really think that if this accelerates, if there are a bunch of people on the hardcore left who continue doing this, all these musicians, aging rockers, who, by the way, don't know their ass from the hole in the ground when it comes to science. These are people who have shot their bodies up completely full of drugs for 70 years. And now they are lecturing you about the necessity of COVID-19 vaccines. And I'm sorry, I don't take their word on this. I just don't. I'll examine the data on my own rather than listen to Neil Young on my health data. But they understand that if they mobilize enough of a contingent, they can get people completely booted. Again, this happens for every neutral service provider. The left makes it so that you will either obey them or you will be destroyed. There is no middle ground. There is no neutral ground at any of these corporations. This is why corporate America has moved to the left. Because corporate America understands that if they kowtow to the left might leave them alone. And if they don't kowtow to the left, then they will be destroyed. Okay, so the goal here for the left is to get rid of Rogan because Rogan holds anti-progressive views on issues like are men women and also should people be fat or not. Right? These are the issues that are very controversial. And again, Spotify, when Rogan first signed with Spotify took down certain episodes of Rogan's show, of Joe's show. And Joe was okay with that because they'd already been out there. They'd already been archived in other places. Well, now I would not be surprised to see Spotify caving to leftist pressure and attempting to censor Joe. And I do not think that Joe is going to stand for that because Joe can walk outside and make exactly the same amount of money. I mean, the reality is Rogan's show is a monster. It's a monster. And what you will see, by the way, is if the left does achieve Spotify deplatforming Rogan, you'll see them start putting pressure on YouTube to get rid of Rogan's YouTube channel. You'll start seeing pressure for that. But here's the thing. There are alternative methodologies available for people like Joe Rogan. We here at Daily Wire will make sure that there are always methodologies available for you to listen to the things that you like and watch the things that you like. But Spotify is indeed beginning to cave. They're doing so on the basis of misinformation, by the way. Not just misinformation about Rogan and COVID, because again, he's had a wide variety of guests on with regard to COVID, ranging from Sanjay Gupta to Robert Malone. But also, you have like a bunch of articles out right now suggesting that the Rogan controversy is what is tanking Spotify's stock. So for example, there's an entire article in the San Francisco Chronicle titled Spotify Loses $4 billion in market value after Neil Young controversy. Okay, but that is not what is happening at all with Spotify. Like, to understand what is happening with Spotify, you have to understand that it has nothing to do with Rogan. Spotify's stock has been sliding since like January 11th. I pulled up the stock for Spotify over the course of the last year or so. When they signed Rogan, that was May 19th, 2021, their stock was at 220. It rose to a high of 300, November 1st, 2021. That was where it was at its very height. And by the way, picking up Rogan led to a massive increase in stock price from, at the time, 220 all the way up to about 275. And then it started to kind of stagnate over the summer because summer is a tough time for the podcast industry generally. And then it started to peak all the way up until November 1. And then it started a slide. It slid all the way until like the beginning of December. And then it basically stabilized until January 11th. And then the stock has been dumping from January 11th until now. All this stuff with Rogan and Spotify didn't start until like a week ago. Okay, which means like late January, not January 11th. So they're just lying. And so the San Francisco Chronicle says Spotify lost $4 billion in market value the week after rock icon Neil Young called out the company for allowing comedian Joe Rogan to use its service to spread misinformation about the COVID vaccine on his popular podcast, The Joe Rogan Experience. At the end of the day, Friday, January 28th, shares of Spotify were down 12% from where they closed last week, according to data from NASDAQ. Right, so against a broader index that was flat over the same period. Yes, but they've been tanking since January 11th. That really has nothing to do with Rogan. But the goal here from the left is to create a concerted narrative, which is that if you keep Rogan, Spotify goes bankrupt, which of course is really, really silly. If they get rid of Rogan, then Spotify has a real problem on their hands. Because what creator of actual interesting content would want to go to Spotify ever again? So here's where things stand currently. There are a bunch of these 1960s rocker types who decided to get involved. It wasn't just Neil Young. It was also Niles Lofgren, who I guess is a guitarist for Springsteen, and Joni Mitchell, who said that they wanted their stuff removed. And then there is a podcast host named Brene Brown, who I guess is some sort of self-esteem guru, who decided that she wouldn't do any more podcasts for Spotify. Meghan Markle and Prince Harry felt the necessity to sign off on all of this. Like, why anyone cares what these people have to say is absolutely beyond me. One of them was a second-rate actress on Suits before she married a second-rate princeling in the UK. And then they moved over here while bitching about their rich and famous lives. These are the most irritating human beings on planet Earth. Honestly, we fought a revolution not to have to deal with this garbage. And then they come over here and follow us because we're the only idiots who will pay them any attention anymore. Meghan Markle and Prince Harry have now expressed their concerns over the spread of COVID-19 misinformation on Spotify, where they have a podcasting deal. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex signed a deal with the popular music and podcast streamer in 2020 that had them producing content for the platform through Archwell Audio, a branch of their larger Archwell brand. Harry and Meghan revealed to Fox News Digital they have their concerns. Now, here's the problem. They've been losing like tons of money for Spotify because who the hell wants to listen to podcasts by Harry and Meghan? Meanwhile, I got 11 million people who are listening to Joe Rogan every single episode. Instead of the media asking themselves, why are people listening to Joe Rogan? What can we do differently? Their goal is, how do we deplatform Joe Rogan and make it so that no one else can listen to his stuff and to his guests? According to the Wall Street Journal, here's where things stand at present. Joe Rogan, responding to Neil Young's objections to his podcast and host Spotify, said his show has grown out of control and pledged to be more balanced and informed about controversial topics and guests. In a late Sunday evening 10-minute Instagram video post, Rogan said, quote, "If I pissed you off, I'm sorry," referring to growing backlash against him and Spotify technology essay, stemming from the folk rockers' accusations they spread false information about COVID-19 vaccines through the popular podcast. Rogan said, "It's a strange responsibility to have this many viewers and listeners. It's nothing that I've prepared for. I'm going to do my best to balance things out." Rogan said he will have more guests on the show that present different opinions from contrarian ones right after he hosts controversial guests. He thanked Spotify for their support, said he is a huge Neil Young fan. Spotify earlier Sunday made public its policies, which it didn't alter, and created a COVID-19 information hub in response to Neil Young removing his music last week from the streaming service. Chief Executive Daniel Ek then put up a blog post on Sunday that said, quote, "We haven't been transparent around the policies that guide our content more broadly. It's become clear to me that we have an obligation to do more to provide balance and access to widely accepted information from the medical and scientific communities guiding us through this unprecedented time." Spotify isn't removing any of Rogan's episodes that detractors have highlighted in recent weeks as spreading what they deem misinformation. Spotify's rules do allow them to remove stuff they consider, quote, "dangerous, deceptive, sensitive, and illegal," and says that creators who break its rules could face consequences. It was Neil Young who led this off, obviously. He wrote a letter saying they can have Rogan or Young, not both. Okay, but this isn't really about that. This is about a bunch of chicken bleat people at the highest levels of advertising and podcasting who are just cowards. They're just cowards. What they should say is, people who want to listen to Rogan can listen to Rogan. People who don't want to listen to Rogan don't have to listen to Rogan. Shut up and listen to what you like. Like, seriously, do what you want. If one corporation had the balls to actually say that, this would all be over. But they won't say it. Instead, they apologize for existing. It's pathetic. Rogan said, quote, "It's good to have some haters." Spotify's Mr. X said there are opinions on both sides of any issue. He personally disagrees with plenty of individuals and views on Spotify. To our very core, we believe that listening is everything, he said. Okay, so here's the deal. If they stand by Rogan, good for them. But I have a feeling that they're not going to. I just have a feeling that because once you put blood in the water like this, once you let them know that they've gotten to you, they will keep coming. Like, Spotify has made clear at this point that they are going to cater to the whims of people like Neil Young. And what they should have just said is, listen, how many more people are going to listen to Joe Rogan than Neil Young this year? Have any idea? Like, tons and tons and tons of people. Tons of people. Spotify can either stand by its decisions or it can run away. But they're now on the verge of doing the same thing that The Atlantic did with Kevin Williamson, or that Georgetown Law School is about to do to Ilya Shapiro. These people hire people knowing exactly what they are and what they do, knowing that these are good business decisions. And then they get a little bit of blowback and they start running for the hills. Well, these cowards, they're only going to end up in the foxhole by themselves, because the left body snatches these companies. Either they take them over or they destroy them, or both. Usually they take them over and they destroy them, because they've destroyed the only thing that made them attractive, which was the ability to listen to people like Joe Rogan in the first place. How's this for a title? Ben Shapiro Show subscriber destroys like button with clicks and logic. I'd watch that. Make it happen, gang.